Good morning if you are in Canada. Good morning in the Eastern Time. Good afternoon in Dubai. I mean, wherever you are and watching us in the world. So welcome to this panel. We have an amazing panelist with me today. And today the title of the panel is How to Survive the Impacts of Digital Transformation and the Evolution of the Cyber Threat Landscape. So it's an amazing topic with an amazing panel. So this is your host and this is the moderator of the panel. My name is Ferris Adi. I'm a cybersecurity professional working for Rogers Communication here in Canada, the largest telecom, as a cybersecurity manager and privacy. Also, I'm an instructor at University of Toronto, and I have my amazing panel. I will start with Muath AlHomoud to present himself very quickly. Hey, good morning, good afternoon, Muath.
Good afternoon, Faris. My name is Muath AlHomoud. I'm a Chief Information Security Officer with over 12 years experience in IT and cybersecurity. And I work one of the major manufacturing company in Saudi Arabia.
Okay, welcome, Muath. Omar Atabani.
Yeah, good morning and good afternoon, good evening. My name is Omar Atabani. I'm the Chief Operation Officer for Cyber 4365, which is a company based out of Dubai currently. I come with more than 15 or 20 years now of experience in IT and cybersecurity. Done a lot of consulting jobs across the globe in different continents. And I'm also a certified IC Square trainer. I deliver CISO training and other technical trainings as well. And I'm happy and glad to be here today. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Omar. Welcome. Ali Hajiri. Ali, my friend.
Yeah, absolutely. So, assuming you can hear me fine, I'm about 10 Canadian years old. This panel is of particular importance to me. I grew up in Dubai, the United Arab Emirates, specifically in an area called Karama. I did my O-levels and my A-levels, the GCE and the GCSE boards. Apparently, I passed as well. So, the Middle East and Dubai is very close to me. I currently work where I lead both the AI and cybersecurity practices at Durham College in a little campus in the region of Durham, the city of Oshawa. So I'm really looking forward to this, and I think Ferris, I'll turn it back to you now.
Okay, thank you, Ali. So just let me give you some details for the audience who are watching us about this panel. So let me start by saying that digital transformation and the immediate need for supporting the remote workers took industry by surprise. What I mean by surprise, I mean the COVID-19 took us by surprise, and now we have thousands of people, maybe millions of people working, remotely. And this changed by the digital transformation and for people to work remotely has presented new risk, created the most significant loss of visibility of security, risk management, and IT professionals. And now the companies, they are continuing to adopt new technologies like AI and machine learnings and IoT. And also, for sure, we should have new ways of defending, evaluating, and delivering effective cybersecurity capabilities in order to succeed. What has come to be known now as the new normal. So now, as we know, some companies, they have invested heavily in technology. And I think this is going to be a good example in Middle East, but the question is going to be, have they changed their organization to make the utmost of this investment? And I think many are struggling to develop the talent, the business processes, and organizational muscle to capture the real value from technology and cybersecurity. So I think now I'm going to start with Muath. With my first questions is, how you establish your priorities to respond to digital transformation and the immediate need, for people to work remotely. Did this take you by surprise as a company, as your company in Saudi Arabia?
Well, thank you so much for the question. It's very excellent question. For us, cybersecurity is not new, and lesson learned from Saudi Aramco and the cyber attack happened in 2012, which led many companies around the kingdom to take that lesson and to adapt to the new norm of threats. Nowadays, there are no missiles, there is no actual war and losses of life. Now there is, it's a digital war, actually, warfare. So for our company, we adapted the cybersecurity a few years back, and we still are doing. And in a matter of maturity, we are going above, in terms of benchmark, going above than the average companies. For us, we have previously identified the business continuity and have identified all kind of risk, whether it's a political, whether it is an environmental and other cyber risks. So I would say no. It was a smooth transition towards having people to work remotely. We already have the technology, we already have the team, we already have the incident response team is on standby for any attack. We are monitoring our infrastructure 24/7 for any threats. All that comes greatly from the Saudi Arabia strategy in terms of cybersecurity. And each companies, they should be aligned with that directive, whether it's being handled by the National Cybersecurity Authority or by other regulators such as SAMA. They all have to align with that. And we frequently receive some threat intels from the government to have the IOCs plugged in our SIM solutions and firewall, as well as other protective technology.
So which means you were prepared for this. It did not. You were not like taken by surprise or caught off guard, right? So you were kind of prepared from a regulator perspective. I'm talking here about Saudi Arabia, and from the maturity of the company, right?
Yes, exactly. So it's both between the company business continuity strategy as well as the cybersecurity as well.
Okay, good. So let me go to Omar. Omar, I believe you live now in UAE, and I'm not sure in Dubai or Abu Dhabi. So can you tell us about the environment there in Dubai and Abu Dhabi, and how the reaction was to this digital transformation, beside the need for remote workers and all those incidents and the attacks because of that?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I'm actually I live in Dubai, part of the UAE. But so definitely the whole COVID-19 and then the working from home, it kind of took a lot of, or many companies here in the industry, or at least within the UAE, by surprise. Nobody was expecting that this is going to go that far, where they're having to do a shutdown, send people back home, and having them to work from home. Or at least in the beginning, it was going to be like, okay, maybe for a couple of days, and then we're going to come back to work and everything goes back to normal. Reality, that didn't happen in that way. So what they had to do is that they had to adopt. Now, some of the organizations that were mature enough, they were able to adopt easier, and it was a smooth transition for them to get into the work from home environment in a secure way. Some didn't. Some have suffered from that. I mean, there were certain organizations or companies here where they had to get to a certain point where they laid off employees because of the fact that there was no work for them to do. So yeah, you had different categories or different grades in terms of the maturity into moving. From our side, being an MSS, we are in the business of continuity and having to ensure we're doing 24/7 and running our monitoring services 24/7. So it wasn't a hard, kind of a transition for us. It allowed us to transition easy, where, moving the SOC and people are doing the monitoring 24/7 using our SOC infrastructure, but then working from home. So that was, an easier transition. The infrastructure was already there. Some organizations, for example, here in Dubai, where they didn't have the infrastructure, so they had to go and invest major, amounts in terms of, VPN and VPN servers or connectivity capabilities, expanding their bandwidth, looking for more of like online collaboration tools like Microsoft Teams or Zoom or WebEx or whatever platforms that were available. because they were able to do that. So some, they actually did it. Now, for some of the others, which is, let's say, I mean, I used to work in McAfee back in the days. And one of the things is that I used to lead a team across the Middle East, across Europe and Middle East. And some of the guys that were part of my team, we never met face to face. So we were doing a lot of work remotely. So we were always on some sort of a conference. We are exchanging by emails, calls, etc. So we got used to the work from home or work remotely. So it wasn't really kind of a new. So for these kind of organizations, i.e. multinational companies where they have resources scattered around the globe, I think this was an easier transition for them, even though they have offices here in Dubai, but most of the time employees don't go to the office or to commute to the office, so they will be working from home. So they already have the capabilities, facilities, and the tools that allow their employees to connect securely into their environment. When you look into organizations like banking sector, for example, or even most of the companies that have a customer service. Now, for these, they had to adjust in a quick way. They had to make some massive investment in terms of the infrastructure, secure connectivity to allow their customer service to be. And until today, most of the customer service, units within any companies in Dubai here are actually working from home. Very few that are actually working from the office.
Okay. So Ali, let's go back to Ali. Ali, so this business continuity disaster recovery, I'm not sure if companies in the past were looking at those two critical processes, if you will, as something luxury, or you think they should be taken seriously, for disaster recovery and how to be embedded in the business continuity. I'm talking here about the importance of doing frequent business impact analysis, understanding your critical processes and your critical applications that should be part of your business continuity, and update them on a frequent basis, test them. So do you think we got to that maturity, or we will, as I said, we were got by surprise, and now people, they are saying, oh my God, I wish we had like a good disaster recovery that covers our critical business process or our critical applications and infrastructure?
Yeah, Ferris, thank you for that. I'll speak a little bit to what Muath and Omar said, and then go back to the question that you brought up. So I'll take a couple of minutes and just speak to that first.
Okay.
From a Canadian perspective, and if you look at the parallels between Canada and the UAE, now myself working within an academic institution that welcomes a lot of students from the Middle East, there were three core areas where we started to see how digital transformation, while we were ready for it, we didn't quite know. At least we weren't aware, we weren't talking a lot about some of the security processes that we needed to follow. A very good example of this, and Omar brought this up quite eloquently, was this element of video collaboration. For example, when you are an academic institution and you are engaging with students, or you are having interactions with them around certain records, around their admissions, around their interest to join different departments, different labs, typically you're doing this by email, you're doing it by phone, and then these students, they come into the country, and then you have face-to-face meetings with them. A lot of the folks from the Middle East were now coming on to platforms like Zoom, WebEx, whatever have you. Typically, there are different rules in the Middle East, at least prior to COVID, around access to these services, and it's not as direct as it is if you're using a Rogers network here, or Bell, or whatever else have you. The first thing that we realized very quickly was on the type of information being shared across some of these sessions. Suddenly now, sometimes in public settings where, let's say, a staffer is in an environment where they don't have good internet, and they've gone to a cafe or they've gone to a public space with social distancing, and they are engaging in a meeting, you're seeing information being shared between a student and a staff member. Critical informations like their ID, dates of birth, so on and so forth. So one of the most fundamental things that we had to shift in terms of our approach towards technology is getting folks to understand that besides the technicalities around firewalls and whatever else have you, there are certain social elements to security, and we had to go through a pretty extensive training process in order to enable that. I've said this a lot of times that, change much before you have to. You have to be able to change on your own before you're forced to change. I would say we were pretty much ready for some change. We weren't just attuned to some of the very fine differences that comes with interacting with an audience outside of Canada. A second element to this, which is absolutely important, is in the types of communications we engage in. We use a lot of bots, we use a lot of chat-based interfaces to exchange data between not just students, but other industries that we work with. So as you know, Ferris, like I do a lot of work with about 60 odd companies developing prototypes. Suddenly now sending a lot of information and data sources, via unsecure mechanisms, sometimes even when, let's say, local email servers have gone down, you have students utilizing their personal email, so on and so forth. A lot of IP getting shared through unsecured mechanisms. I wouldn't say, again, that we didn't have practices in place. There was just this nervousness of making sure communications are ongoing. Because now we're not in person, because now we're not seeing our clients face to face, the students are not seeing their professors like myself face to face, there's an urgency to keep going, so you try any means possible. And I found that the second thing that we found ourselves really rooted in is the education element, explaining to folks how do you protect IP across digital ecosystems, what are the right ways to share files, what are not, what are some of the signs that they need to be looking for. So really awareness campaigns have been at the forefront of everything that we've been doing. From a backup and a continuity perspective, I would say yes, pandemic awareness, really if you were into early Jan 2020, the alarm bells were ringing. Various conferences that we were at were talking a lot about the realities of what might happen if we move into a new perimeter, if we move into a home which becomes our enterprise. But I will say this, is that what became very apparent as a result of this shift was the amount of individualized backup plans and recovery plans that we found. In an academic institution, shadow IT is always the second and the third and the fourth person in the room, besides myself and yourself. And we noticed different individuals had their own mechanisms of how they were planning to come up if their core device went down. And I found that this was not just because of the fact that they didn't have resources, but remember is that funding gets allocated in certain ways. Everybody practices different things, has different machines that they've spun up for certain instances. So every individual has developed their own pathway. So what was really phenomenal in all of this was not to look at shadow IT with a negative standpoint, but to now unpack why was this happening and to now empower folks with some best practices if they were going down the path of also creating their own backup strategies. Now, I'm not saying that I endorse the fact that, hey, a graduate student can deploy their own backups or whatever have you, but within reason, we were now able to accommodate for some of their preferences as well. So if anything, the pandemic from a security standpoint has got us to realize the other side of the coin and look at certain practices and say, maybe these aren't so bad if we adhere to a certain framework. Hope that helped, Ferris.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ali. That was very helpful from educational standpoint. Let me go to Omar and, with the same theme. So Omar, let me share something with you. I'm not sure if you heard about this before. So a few years ago, I was doing my MBA in Norwich universities in the US. As part of, my assignment was doing a research about business continuity and disaster recovery. I find something amazing facts about the lessons learned from the 9/11, the tragedy, we survived. I think all of us here, in this panel. So as part of this, the lessons learned, there were some hospitals, they found that their business continuity plan was not updated since 1954. Can you believe that? Right. So, which means business continuity, disaster recovery, as I said, it's not really something, you would think about it. It's a luxury, but it's a must. So in spite of this, how in UAE, in your company, how you were, taken by surprise by having an updated, tested business continuity and disaster recovery?
Yeah, so I agree with you. So one of the toughest areas, and I would say the weakest areas that we had it, and this is pretty much, I've seen it across the Middle East, was business continuity. I mean, as a consultant, whenever I was engaged in a business continuity project, it was always hard to sell that to the senior management or the top management because they are not comprehending that something like this can happen. And idea is that for them to come and invest on something but it may never happen, right? That was always a reluctant elements and there was always a resistance to that. I think one of the, and I hate to put it this way, but I say one of the advantages of the COVID-19 situation is it has really demonstrated the importance of business continuity. And I want to also echo in what Ali was saying, which is the second part, and that is the security awareness, right? So the two things that you see them happening now across, I would say at least across this region here, is that there is a good amount of awareness of business continuity and the importance of business continuity as a practice within the organization, maturing it, implementing the right set of processes in place, testing the plans, educating and conducting awareness about business continuity for the end users and everybody within the organization. There is also a security awareness part, which is nowadays with the remote work from home, one of the things, for example, we have seen a spike on it in the last 6 months is the phishing attacks, right? So we've seen a very high phishing attacks happening. This is across the globe, and it really spiked up, more than we have seen before. And unfortunately, many organizations has fallen, victims for this kind of phishing. I recently was, for example, engaged with one of the clients here in the UAE, which is as they were a victim of a ransomware attack, which turns out to be from, again, a phishing, compromisation. So these two, business continuity, security awareness, are now becoming the two hottest topics, I would say, across the region. I believe also globally, because even globally, as you mentioned, not so many organizations were really up to date and mature enough when it comes to business continuity. Examples of the September 11, some of these companies or institutes that they had the business continuity out of date, and they just didn't survive. Some of them, they suffered severely comparing to others. Like I said, from our business perspective, as a security consultation / MSS, the business continuity is a key element, especially when it comes to the MSS part. So for example, and even with the cyber training as well. So cyber training, we converted all of our physical trainings into virtual training. So again, going back to what Ali was saying, we adopted Teams, we adopted Zoom, where we start to deliver. So there wasn't any downtime in that. We actually just said, okay, you know what? We're just going to move this to a virtual because regulation, even like local mandates, were preventing us from even conducting training, whether in-house, at hotel facilities. It was all blocked down or banned. So we had to go to virtual. So that's the adaptation of that. The technology was there that allowed us, or the infrastructure that allowed us to say, okay, we're going to move this into that. From the managed security services or the monitoring part, again, the same thing. We were able to not have that much of an impact because, even before this, sometimes you may have not everybody in the shift will be able to work from the SOC. They can be working from their home. They do a VPN into the SOC, and then from the SOC, they get access to the client's data. So that's, again, kind of was already in place. The only one that a little bit, I would say, too much impacted was the consultation element. Customers were so much used to the consultants being on site, doing face-to-face conversations and workshops. So again, we had to shift these into using collaboration tools like Zoom or Teams to conduct those workshops and get into the whole digital world, virtualization where, I'm talking to you, you're sitting in Saudi, or Muath is sitting in Saudi, you're sitting in Canada, I'm sitting in Dubai. And we're still able to conduct the business, do a useful and a fruitful workshop that allows us to be able to carry on with our consultation practice, as we say it. So yeah, I mean, I would say these are the key elements we look into it now. Also, as we move forward, I think there are many organizations globally, not just only in the Middle East, have come to realization of the importance of business continuity. So we are seeing this already happening in the market where clients are reaching out and say, hey, I want to, look into my business continuity. I want to do, make sure it's mature enough. I want to make sure it's up to date, right? Awareness programs. I mean, literally in each and every request I'm getting it nowadays on sometimes multiple twice a day, is that we need to build a security awareness program. Not just only your typical, like awareness modules running online, but a full-fledged awareness program. So you see there's a maturity happening in that area as well. This is showing, or I guess this is the lessons learned, I would say, that lots of companies now are realizing it from the COVID situation, because The September 11 was a catastrophic event, but when you look at it from a global scale, it was kind of limited to a certain geolocation, I would say. It impacted certain organizations within that geolocation. When you look into COVID-19, this is not the case anymore. We're talking about a global pandemic. We're talking about a global disaster where whether you are in China or you're in Russia or the Middle East or North America or wherever you are, you're going to have to adopt this. You have to think how you're going to continue your business. And it's not like news, but we've seen and we know in different locations around the globe, certain businesses have actually went out of business. Why? They couldn't survive the situation of the COVID-19.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Omar. Let me go to Muath. So Muath in Saudi Arabia, the same topic, and the same theme. But let me just try to take it from a different perspective, taking into consideration the cloud. And Cisco, I think before the pandemic, I'm talking about the COVID-19. I don't want to keep referring to the COVID, but I think now moving your data, your critical data, your crown jewels to the cloud by 2025, as Cisco is predicting that 90% of data is going to go to the cloud. So from that perspective, how do you think we are prepared, we are mature to have our your company's data on the cloud after maybe a few years, 100% in the cloud, and in spite of what we were talking about, business continuity, the maturity of disaster recovery, and who's the responsible? Is it from the public cloud? Is it AWS? Is it Azure? Is it Google? From that perspective, what's your intake on this?
Well, it's a good question, Ferris. Actually, our company adopted the cloud-first strategy back in 2017. So from that time, we shifted our minds toward the cloud. It was a challenging task to the board itself. They're having the doubts of the cloud. How secure is it? How is it different than what we are doing? Once they understand the criticality of moving the cloud, how is it cost effectiveness? How is it require less manpower than the usual? Everything became easier. So from 2017, we adapted that approach, and since that time, we already moved our infrastructure to the cloud. I don't want to mention names. It's not like I want to do an advertisement to anyone, but since that time we moved to the one of the public clouds, and we have remained some of the few things on-prem. Either because of the legacies of some legacy systems or some other regulatory requirement. Otherwise, I can confidently say since 2017 up to this moment, we are 90% in the cloud. Things become easier. We always adapt the SaaS solutions. Leaving the configuration and the security matters to the vendor who's controlling that, which gives us the time and privilege to work on some other projects for the company. So what I believe at this moment, we have a new entity in Saudi Arabia called Sadaya, which is related to data and artificial intelligence, and they are hosting the most biggest hub in the region, over 300 data centers. And it is required by the government for all government entities to shift to that data center. As well, it's going to be open soon for others in the private sector to have to be a tenant in those data centers. We are moving, and everything, I believe, within the next year, actually, we will see many of the public clouds like Azure, AWS already here, sorry, Oracle is already here, but the rest are sometimes to be here in the upcoming year or two. And we will see a very big shift in other companies toward the cloud.
Okay, thank you, Muath. Thank you, Muath. So Ali, and the same and the same theme, on the same thing, what's your intake about the cloud from educational standpoint in Durham College and protecting the crown jewels, the assets, since, you know, we are just going with this norm now, with going with the cloud?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things here that I want to unpack, right? Number one is that when you look at the cloud environments that we've had this, you know, we teach about cloud modules, we teach about acceleration on the clouds across in various courses that we run. So taking our applied work, especially if I focus right now, the college obviously, much like enterprise, is a huge institution, right? But if I focus in on the work that I do with the students, besides the classwork and the work that we do with industry, one of the core things that we've been able to do is for a long period of time is virtualize our environments, right? So we've been working in these cloud structures for a very, very long time. So it wasn't alien to us when we had to work remotely. I will tell you where there were 3 areas where my eyes were opened up in different ways. Number one was in the kind of logging that was suddenly happening as a result of folks now not being in the lab itself. And I give credit to the principal investigators that work alongside with me who manage some of these projects, because now what had happened was this sense of hygiene, this sense of awareness and alertness. One of the things that I started noticing was a lot of my students, especially the graduate students, were now reporting incidents to me much more effectively and much more quicker. Whether this was coming from a point of fear or whether this was just coming from a realization that this is a very new reality, I'm not too sure, but reporting was happening much more common. I think when I was talking to my friends at Central IT, they were also talking about the fact that they were getting more, if you want to call them so, getting more tips about, hey, I just saw this email or I just got this text and it's spoofing a Durham College email or a particular individual within the college. Can you take a look at it? So that was something that was very good. Although an informal logging process, it's now got me thinking about how do we take these informal insights and how do we action them in different ways. That's number one. Number two is when you are deploying and you are working exclusively in the cloud, your labs are on the cloud, your classrooms are on the cloud. You know, one of the other things that became very much more apparent to us was the susceptibility that the cloud opens us up to. And, you know, very few people think about the realities on the ground for an academic environment. While it's great that now I can run a range, for example, through a SaaS model, I can run a capture the flag kind of environment through a cloud-based environment, and I can work with different providers to do that. You know, the insights that I have into the actual activity are still lacking. So one of the things that's a big topic for us here is on the aspect of plagiarism and cheating. And as much as we like to believe that, you know, our students who have worked with us over a period of time may not engage in that, also you have to remember we have one-off environments as well. We do corporate trainings, we do trainings where folks come in for quick certifications. How can you ensure that legitimacy around your process when you are 100% cloud? And I don't think we have the answers to all of that yet. We are still operating with a bit of a social contract and hoping that our institution, but our students that are involved with us don't necessarily cross those lines. And it's not the easiest leap of faith that I as an instructor am willing to make. That is something that on the cloud keeps me awake a great deal. The third thing that we realized very, very quickly as we have been scaling more and more across the cloud is the reality of the fact that now from a service perspective, we're expected to be a lot faster. Not just our instructors in terms of responding online, so on and so forth, our support infrastructure around this. And remember is that part of security and part of, you know, your recovery plans and part of your business continuity plans also ensures that, you know, you maintain the reputation and integrity of an institution. And, you know, the amount of requests that are coming in, especially because foreign students who are unable to come into the country are working in different time zones, meeting those requests, scaling our environments, scaling our VMs to ensure that these students can conduct their applied work as well, has put a new insight and a new strain on our departments. I'd say that, you know, we've stepped up to the plate in many ways, but we've only scratched the surface when it comes to realizing the kind of threats that might now emerge. And I'll leave you with one thing. Transformation, when you talk about transformation, often we don't engage in it because of the fear of something new. I don't think we had this fear. We've always had the hope and worked with the art of possible. But I will tell you something is that when you are working in an academic environment, the disgruntled student or the dissatisfied customer, if you want to call them that, now has multiple avenues to enter into your environment. And you got to keep your eyes open where your eyes were previously closed. So definitely challenging and exciting. And I want to commend the team, both at Durham College, but also the college system in general, especially through the on-check program of how we've come together and shown some strength amidst all of the digital transformation.
Right. So let me go back to Omar. Omar, we keep hearing about the 5G, the new technology, and how 5G is really, a revolution, and especially with the impact as enabler of, the technology. Especially here, I'm talking about the Internet of Things, the IoT, and, the million or the billion of devices we're going to have maybe by 2025. So with that technology, and especially 5G is built on the virtualizations and on the cloud, because the huge amount of data is going to be collected and processed. So what's your intake from that perspective? That are we really ready now with the 5G and the evolution and and protecting the terabyte of thousands of terabyte of data is going to floating around?
Well, let's put it this way. I'm freaking out about this part. So here is the thing, right? So you actually, you mentioned like 3 different, let's say, architectures or technologies that came back to back. So cloud, IoT, and then 5G, right? Now, cloud by itself is, and I think like my colleagues were saying, at least here in the region, we're seeing an adaptation or a growth in the adopting of the cloud technology or cloud architecture, which something wasn't happening, I would say, maybe like 5 or 8 years ago, where we started talking to cloud and it was like a no-no. Nowadays, business is driving that. So the business is the driver, and business is driving the infrastructure to go to the cloud. Now, the other element into it, so there is a good adaptation of cloud in the region, but then becomes the matter of, do we have the right level of maturity or security maturity to integrate with the cloud or to maintain our data in a secure way, as well as conduct our operations, etc. Now, SaaS, of course, is one of the most, like best, common practices. Lots of organizations start with the SaaS, but then when you start looking into like what Muath is saying, where 90% of your infrastructure is on the cloud, you have a 10% sitting still in here or on-prem, then it becomes a challenging situation where in the cloud, the security of that infrastructure, especially if you're going with an IaaS or infrastructure as a service or a platform as a service, the security will lie, at least IaaS, it will lie on you. So I have to secure my infrastructure on the cloud. I don't see there is enough maturity happening in the region to be able to do that. Now, combine that with the IoT showing up. Now, IoT is a challenge by itself. One of the challenges we're having with IoT is there is no standardizing or a standardization method in terms of the implementation of IoT. I mean, each manufacturer kind of just picked it up. They looked into the diagrams, so like, okay, we're going to create our own IoT. So whether you're doing a TV, you're doing a microwave, you're doing a fridge, whatever you're doing in terms of an IoT, and it's the same thing is happening in security. Security is very low in these IoTs. We don't have a well-defined framework to implement security within IoT environment.
Right.
So now, so while we're trying to tackle these 2 areas, now you jump in with the 5G element, which is the 5G, the whole, let's say, advantage and the whole key selling point of it is the integration with the cloud, with the IoT and the mass, bandwidth we're going to get it and all of that, which means that's good for the business because now you can, and I like to use some of the, the marketing videos you see, you can download a video in, I don't know how many seconds or how many minutes on Netflix or something like that. but that's also expose our infrastructure, whether internal infrastructure or cloud-based infrastructure, to being exposed and having a larger bandwidth that allows hackers to do even more. So if back in the days I needed to have, I don't know, a couple of millions of bots or zombies in order for me to do a DDoS, nowadays I don't have to do that, because pretty much I can, just grab a couple of, 5G connections, and I should be able to do it in a very effective way to bring an organization down. Not everybody is going to jump into 5G. I mean, it is still growing. I mean, I think a few providers now they're starting to say, okay, yes, we have 5G. We're seeing devices being converted, especially mobile devices, into 5G capabilities. The technology itself is still, I would say, young, still new. And as we start exploring it, we're going to see more and more vulnerabilities, more and more ways of how we can expose and exfiltrate that specific technology and get the best out of it, both in a white hat way or even in a black hat way. So it goes always both ways, the yin and yang, right? So there is always the white hat, there is the black hat. It's going to add advantages. It's going to enhance our communication mechanisms, and definitely going to open the floor for more innovation and infrastrucures and technologies to be implemented. But at the same time, we have to keep an eye about this comes with the price, and what is the price in terms of securing that innovation, securing that transformation, securing the transforming from being an e-world, right, and which is now this is where we're going to, where everything is running on the cloud. There's a couple of, again, going back to the cloud, one of the elements in terms of the implementation of the cloud, and I think Muath, maybe he touched on that, is you have this new regulations popping up across the region here, at least in the Middle East, which is basically restricting that any cloud, usability needs to be done as an in-country. So in other words, in order for me to provide a cloud service, I have to be in country in order for me to serve that. That's, I think, one of the reasons maybe you have companies like Microsoft Azure, which is, they are here in the UAE, for example, they have one of their data centers in Abu Dhabi. That's opened the business for Microsoft very well during this pandemic situation, because lots of the companies that were looking into going to the cloud and were restricted with the in-country cloud, they have an in-country data center from Microsoft. They can do it now. AWS is actually now doing also some major investments in the region to be able to meet the local regulations and local requirements, regularities, in terms of having in-country cloud or cloud data centers. So I would say I wish we can look into things by establishing committees where we're looking into the IoT as a technology as well as the infrastructure, and trying to define, like we did back in the days with the OSI model. Let's put something that can be as a standard use in terms of implementing certain security measures. Security requirement needs to be available in every IoT. 5G, we're looking at it only from the business. So we're doing the same mistake we did it, for example, in applications, where our focus is always going to be, or has always been, in the functionality, right? Rather than we're not looking into security. Security is an afterthought. The same thing is happening now. Look at IoT, look at 5G. We're making the same mistake again. We're focusing on what it's going to bring to us, the goods and everything, but we're not looking into security in 5G. We're not looking into security in IoT. And I think the very close or near future is gonna show us that, but it's gonna show it to us in a very memorable kind of events or incidents that's globally we're gonna be aware of it, and we're gonna say, okay, now we really have to talk about security, or talk security seriously when it comes to IoT, 5G, and all of those elements.
Right, thank you. So Muath, I mean, with what Omar mentioned about IoT, and there is no really a standard to build the IoT devices. IoT devices, everybody want to manufacture, and sell to the market. and maybe looking for some funding in order for them to have security by design. So I want to just touch base on this in your company. When we have kind of they want to do the business, they want to invest heavily in IoT, and because there are some benefits with the IoT devices, the technology, and also in and the impact and of 5G. So how you look about the conflict between going and to Omar's point, the functionality, we look at the functionality, the business want to go ahead, make the right investment without looking into security. So as a CISO, how you feel that are we ready to go there, or all the time maybe you have a conflict from business and security perspective?
Well, before I answer this question, I want to address the elephant in the room. Okay, and the major issue is the skills. We are lacking the capabilities and skills from people, or how can I say this? From a cybersecurity perspective, we don't have that much of people who are skilled enough to skillful or experience in cloud or 5G. It's still new, although it's been a while in the market, but it's still new. We are lacking the experience in that part, and by 2022, I think the whole world will be suffering from this matter of getting the right people in place to have these cybersecurity, controlling the critical infrastructure and handling a project such as the IoT and 5G as well as the cloud. That's one thing. The other thing, I want to come back to Omar regarding, I know it's the IoT is still new, but there are other ways which people nowadays are talking about the zero trust architectures. Right. I believe in having such a concept adapted in our infrastructure, we will be in a good shape to protect our assets, meaning trust no one, just verify. That's the whole thing. Whether it's a resource, whether it's a hacker, whether it's a legitimate user, or is it server talking to another server, adapting such a concept is a must from my point of perspective, as well as it adds value to the cybersecurity in what we call the castle concept of our network.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I mean, I agree with you, Muath. However, what you're talking about from the zero zero trust framework or ZTF, that's more of the way I'm looking at it. That's an individual initiative by the organization. However, the industry itself, when we look into 5G or you look into IoT, as an industry, there is no any regulation that looks into securing that products or that technology before putting it out to consumers, right? I agree with you. ZTF is a good practice to go for it, but that's, let's say you have done that, right? But how would I know? I mean, for us might not do it. I mean, Ali may do it. I may not do it. So that's an individual initiative usually by the organization. What we're talking about is something more about the industry itself, the technology itself. We're bringing this new technology. There is no any keeper around, security elements into it, and it's just being consumed or being produced and consumed with no restrictions or no implementation of security or security implementation or security by design, like for us.
Right, Omar. So let me take this and go to Ali with this thought. So this is important. So let me comment on Muath. Muath mentioned something very important, and I think this was part of the write-up of this panel, that the companies, they are investing heavily in technology, and sometimes we forget cybersecurity is technology, it's people, and it's processes. And we need to know the maturity of the people and the processes. So with people, did we do the right investment? Because what's the point of investing heavily in technology and we don't have the right people, the right skills to make use or to benefit from this technology? And I have seen, in many big companies, they have the technology, but they cannot find the right people, the skills to use that technology. So Ali, from educational standpoint, what you are doing from that, how you are bridging this gap with bringing the right skills, to the industry?
Yeah, no, listen, both with Omar and with Muath, I have absolutely no contention in the fact that, I've said this before, Internet of Things can very easily become the Internet of Threats. But I do want to go to two very important points here. We keep talking about, and I know we're making some generalizations here, and there are subtle differences between the Middle East and the Canadian and the North American context. But when new innovations and new products come into, let's say, the Durham College fold, and we are building, one very important thing to keep in mind is the source of the funding. It's not usually venture capital or private equity funding that's coming into these projects. It's usually a mix of some industry cash and then a push from our provincial, municipal, and even federal governments that match up to sometimes 70% of the total development costs. In that requirement, within that funding, is the stipulation that I have to submit a report stating how I am going to be storing the data that I'm gathering from the data beacons, as an example. What are some of the protocols that I'm using when I am taking, for example, account of how many people are walking through a particular area? Not only am I expected to advise on the hardware and how I've secured it by design and the sources of my hardware, and you can as well imagine where some chips I'm allowed to use, some chips where I'm not. I do have to submit a very clear impact assessment and a very clear privacy standard guideline showing which guidelines I am following. So here, depending on the source of the funding, you actually go through a very, very thorough, not just social and ethical review, a technical review before even a single dollar can be spent. And typically, it can take about 2 to 3 months before I have sign off on when a project can start. This sometimes can also impact innovation, where you have some companies that would say, look, those 3 to 4 months is going to cost me X amount of dollars in lost revenue. I'm going to go develop this elsewhere. Can they bypass some of those assessments? They could. But even in the Canadian market, as you know very well, Ferris, when a product comes out, there are certain standards that you're expected to declare. Now, when it comes to the student and the talent perspective, there are two things that we're doing, and I'll take 30 seconds to summarize this. Number one is the idea of sandboxes. The ability to create a sandbox environment where we know where certain devices are acting in a way that they shouldn't, and getting our students to basically understand and pinpoint some of those environments. This is core to games such as collegiate penetration testing competition that we ran 2 weeks ago, where you literally simulate these machines both from a hardware perspective and a virtual perspective. You create in them certain deceptive practices and you get the students to point them out. Huge element right now and emphasis right now on gamification and rewards. There's a bit of a rewards culture that we've created on stopping a lot of these practices at the very bud, being able to spot them out very early. And I cannot underemphasize how important it is to create a culture around this, to reward such findings. The second part that I'll bring up is that when it comes to training, so on and so forth, one of the things that the college is doing very well is partnering with other certification bodies as well, but not just certification bodies, other manufacturing bodies as well. So we are doing work with the CISCOs of the world, we are doing work with the Palo Altos of the world, and bringing in some of their curriculum. The key here is not just bringing in their curriculum tabula rasa, bringing in their curriculum, but having faculty members also who have had that industry experience. They're not just coming in as armchair philosophers, they have deployed these technologies. And that makes a very, very big difference. I'll take a slight detour from what was said earlier on by Omar, where he said that we're still scratching the surface on these technologies. Here, I wouldn't say we're scratching the surface on the technologies itself, we're scratching the surfaces on the applied realities of these technologies. And because of COVID-19, 2 years worth of innovation is happening within 2 months. And I think, and I would rather say I know, that from a college standpoint, we've been pretty prepared for this reality, and we're doing quite strong with it. About 22 different companies that are working with us on IoT developments. That says something.
Okay, thank you. So we just have 5 minutes. I need to ask this question, important question about the zero trust, because Muath mentioned something important about the zero trust.
Yep.
So I'm going to mention from my own perspective, and I need Muath and Omar and Ali to comment quickly on it because we just have 5 minutes. So do you feel like I have a feeling that zero trust becomes more, or when it was initiated, it was more like a driver by the vendors. It's a buzzword, meaning that, the zero trust, if you use my product, you're going to solve all your problems and you're going to protect your, critical assets and your crown jewels. And sometimes I feel when they talk about it, they forget about, our traditional thinking of security, which is defense and depth. Defense and depth, having multiple layer of security, it's important, and it can be supported by the zero trust, especially now with this situation. We have, mostly 90% of the workforce working from home. So Omar, what's your comment on that? Is it really the driver by vendors, or this is really a necessity, the zero trust, or we can maybe combine by our traditional defense and depth?
Yeah, well, so, it's like everything else, right? Vendors usually would ride the buzzword and ride the wave. So, ZTF, DID, defense in depth, or AI. I mean, you look around you and just suddenly, ZTF is if you look at it as a framework, I'm talking from an implementation perspective in terms of enhancing my security posture. It is a very mature, and it's a very practical and an effective framework to be implemented. And it's not so far away from the DID, principles or defense in depth. It's kind of almost the same, just looking into things from a different angle, a different perspective. But then, yes, it becomes more of a buzzword, especially used by a vendor. So suddenly my product is ZTF, right? You want to implement ZTF, use my product. You want to, a product who has been in the industry for the last, let's say, 15 years, suddenly their product is an AI. They have artificial intelligence on it. We have machine learning. So AI, ML, ZTF, it's everybody. That's the buzzword. They want to use it, and they just ride that wave, whether it is reality or not reality. And I think this is, again, goes back into, our awareness, our doing our due diligence. I'm a big fan of ZTF. I actually implemented and use it in a couple of for my clients, and help them to implement as a framework to move forward and to enhance their maturity level when it comes to security. From a vendor perspective, I'm gonna have to do like a due diligence in order for me to make sure it's really the product is really ZTF, or how does it apply ZTF as in principle of it. If as you move forward into that and ask more questions, you find that they're actually looking into only one element or one piece of the ZTF, right. And that's what they're saying. Oh, we have a ZTF product.
Sorry, Omar, to interrupt you because we have 2 minutes. Muath, please.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Sorry, Muath.
I concur what Mr. Omar mentioned. ZTF or ZTA is not a piece of technology. It's not something you buy. Actually, it's most of the components of ZTA or ZTF is already in your infrastructure. When we talk about, like, for example, next generation firewalls, if you have a DLP, data leakage prevention systems.
Data loss prevention.
Yeah. So the main thing about it's only a concept that can be applied, and it can be acceptable to any kind of organization. You don't have to be a high or a large company to do it. You can do it actually even if you have a small company. It's just a matter of creating a special segmentation where you pass all the traffic to that, and based on the policy that you're gonna allow or prevent the access to any part of that.
I agree.
Any zone within your infrastructure.
Yep.
Thank you, Muath. Ali?
Yeah,
you
I've
only
always
1
said
minute.
this, is that especially in our environments, we'll claim to follow zero trust and yet have a full acceptance policy on almost anything. So it's very easy for a student, for example, to request access to a machine, so on and so forth. So there's a bit of a double standard there. But here's what I will say when it comes to our approach towards zero trust, especially from a teaching and an innovation standpoint. I've always held to this belief that, You got to pee in every corner. You got to mark your territory. I don't put my principal investigators outside of the technical discussions when it comes to security. One of the things that I found myself right now is training my staff, especially on the fact that just because a student is on, what are some of those traits that you need to be looking for in order to verify them? So for us, if anything, Zero Trust has now, just as my colleague said before, has become less of a technical conversation and more of a people conversation. And in that order, people, process, technology. We've started to train our staff with understanding what constitutes legitimate digital presence versus not, and empowered them with either removing somebody from that environment or reporting it and ensuring that our response are within a very quick period of time. So it's created for a lot of efficiencies, but it's also, like I said earlier on, thanks to Zero Trust, we've created a new system of logging and reporting that is definitely enhancing our posture and securing us in more ways than one.
Okay, thank you so much. We are on time. I think it was very interesting conversation. I hope we have more maybe time to continue asking those questions and having those nice discussions. So finally, I mean, I have to thank you know, the panelists, amazing panelist, Omar Atabani in Dubai, Muath AlHomoud in Saudi Arabia and Riyadh. I'm not sure if you're in Riyadh. And our friend from CyberX, Ali Hajiri from Durham College. So thank you so much for listening to this, and please let us know if you have any questions to our panelists. We're, you know, they are very happy and pleased to answer your questions. Yep. Thank you so much for your coming here and talking to us in this, you know, the Middle East CISO forum. Thank you so much for your contribution.
Thank you so much.
Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Omar. Thank you, Muath. Thank you, Ferris.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.